I find the first blessing in Shachrit, Yotzer, really fascinating. So it starts out, first of all, with a quote from Isaiah, Yotzer or v'oreh choshech, that God creates light and dark. But the rabbis changed the quote a little bit. So the line is from Isaiah 45:7, and Isaiah goes on to say, God creates peace and evil. And the rabbis weren't comfortable having evil ascribed to God in that key place in the service, and so they changed it to everything. Yotzer or v'oreh choshech, oseh shalom, uvoreh et hakol. Which I think is good, among other reasons, for a racial justice lens, because biblical poetry often operates in a parallelism. And I would hate to start every morning with an analogy that light is about peace and dark is about evil. So better to say that dark is part of everything. Then Yotzer, the blessing, continues talking about God creating light and the planets and the natural world. And then it slips into something more mystical. In order to understand that, I have to give you a quick bit of history of an underground kind of Jewish mysticism called Merkava mysticism that flourished around the year 100, 200, around the writing of the Mishnah, and was practiced by some of the same rabbis involved in writing the Mishnah, and then kind of was forced underground and disappeared as a normative part of Jewish practice, but continues to show up in our davening. So Merkava means chariot, and it refers to the idea that you could, through meditation and other practices, actually get your soul to leave your body and ascend to the heavens and catch a glimpse of God's chariot and the angels that surround God. One of the markers of Merkava mysticism is long strings of repetitive synonyms. So you see it, for instance, after the Shema in this paragraph that starts v'yatziv v'rachon v'kayam v'yashar v'ne'eman v'ahuv, etc. That kind of repetitive rhythm sort of can induce a trance. And the earliest text of Aleinu we have comes out of the Merkava tradition. So that's an interesting little historical footnote. So one of the places the Merkava tradition shows up in our liturgy every day is in Yotzer, in that slippage between what's God creating the natural world and what are the angels that surround God. And you see that even in El Adon, in the second verse, Hamit ga'el chayot hakodesh v'ne'edar ala Merkava. Right, so it goes from God creating light to God being dominant among these celestial beings and enthroned in glory on the Merkava, on the chariot. And you really, really see it when we get into the Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh section, which is just straight up Merkava mysticism. We're now sort of imagining ourselves up in heaven with the angels, praising God. And then we get to this line, this quote from Psalm 136, which we usually sing in Psukei de Zimra, where the psalmist says, Le'oserim gedolim, to the one who made the great lights, ki le'olam chasdo, God's love is forever. And I always at that point imagine that the mystic is like up and imagining all the angels, and it's this great soul set. All of a sudden he's like, oh shoot, we're supposed to be talking about God creating the world. And so he quickly jumps back in, Or chadash ad Zion ta'ir, God will cause a new light to shine on Zion, and quickly wraps up, Baruch atah Yotzer barachot, praised are you, God, who created the lights. And just a final quick thought on Or Chadash, on the new light on Zion. Obviously, this was written centuries and centuries ago when the Jews were in exile, and there's a very small community living in the land of Israel, so there's always this desire to return. In a contemporary sense, I always like to look to this line when I think about Israel and all the tsuris, all the troubles going on there, that one day God will cause a new light to shine on Zion and help us to see things in that new light. Historically speaking, it may very well have been a line about the Messianic era, when the whole world will be recreated anew. But that's a topic for another time. So that's Shachrit, blessing number 1 for you.